Good morning. I'm Dan Edelman with Heritage Capital Group, your host this morning on Daily Business Brief. Joining me this morning is Don Fox with Works from Don Fox, but really Don, the former CEO of Firehouse Subs, was with Firehouse for a lot of years, helped grow that business, and ultimately sold it to Restaurant Brands for $1 billion, at least of what's been published.
That is correct, though. Yes. Great to be with you, Dan.
Well, thank you. Don, I think what would be interesting for our viewers to hear about is you helped Firehouse grow from, what was always a family business into a very large business, then ultimately sold to a very large company. And as leaders are trying to build their businesses, the kind of advice that you give them to get to that point.
Well, sure. I mean, there's so many lessons along the way. Yeah, I think if you're aspiring to build something as large as we did, I mean, thinking about when I joined Firehouse, there were 65 restaurants the first day I ever met the Sorensens.
It was smaller when I met them.
Yes. So you saw a lot of you were there for
yes.
a lot of the ride. But if you have an aspiration to do something, building over 1,000 restaurants in the end, we were about 1,200 when I wrapped up at retirement. I was always a proponent of reverse engineering. So even from the earliest times, it was important to have a really solid vision of where we were going to go. And I always knew you couldn't mind map everything,
right,
every step of the way. Too many things happen, especially if you're talking about a really long-term 10, 15, 20-year plan. It ended up being 20 years on my tenure. So you can't map every step, but if you've got that North Star, you always know where you're going. At least then you're calibrating every decision along the way towards that. And with every, especially some of the more, not impulsive, but more contemporary decisions you have to make based on circumstances at the time, it's always knowing, you're always conscious of whether it's taking you closer or veering away a bit. And sometimes you have to veer away a little bit out of necessity, but it's with intention. And then you've got to make your way back to the main path. So that was fundamental. And then a ton of things go in concert with that.
So Don, I mean, we all think, or you and I think fairly linearly, but it wasn't a linear path. And there were a lot of roadblocks and bumps. I mean, a lot of leaders, I think, don't understand that it's not a straight path to get there. And how did you adjust as you hit bumps in the road?
Yeah, I think what was, with Firehouse, I think what was very important was the chemistry that I had with the Sorensens, because they are not linear thinkers necessarily, and very creative, and seeing different opportunities. And in the early days, it was very important for them to be nimble. Nimble, somewhat opportunistic. Always some risk comes with that, and there were some missteps, but they had even before I got there, a good way of recovering from that and adjusting a little bit more on the fly. When I came on board, then it was with a little bit more focused direction on the things that we had to do. But to the point of your question, yes, some things would happen. I would have to adjust. I think one of the main assets I had in being able to adjust ended up being the people around me. Because so often it was being able to lean on great team members for their advice, counsel, the strengths that they had, because none of us have all the answers. By the way, another key strength of the Sorensens, something that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have. Many entrepreneurs think they have all the answers, but they were very wise to know where they had to bring in talent to help supplement what they need to do. That's probably strategically, probably one of the biggest difference makers in terms of success and failure for the org.
I mean, I was going to say, one of the biggest failures I've seen of entrepreneurs like the Sorensens is that they think they know it all, and that they're not willing to bring in a Don Fox to say, I'm going to serve as a board member and give you advice, but I need your expertise. So I credit them for making that pivot.
It's interesting now that I'll say semi-retirement. I've had folks knocking on my door for advisory roles, board roles, et cetera. And what's a bit different is when you're not in a controlling situation and just an advisory position, and I imagine even some of the things you've done in your life, it's like this. You're offering your best advice, and counsel, and it's a tremendously great feeling when it's followed and it goes around and it's successful. And it's somewhat it's a bit sad when you see someone doesn't take that route and it doesn't work out, and you're never in the business of I told you so's. But I look back on a couple of those instances when I've been in an advisory capacity, and you kind of, and then but I'll even question, could I pushed a little harder in that role and made it have a more positive outcome?
It's a fine line. Talk for a second, as we get close to wrapping up here. The Sorensens or Firehouse, gave back a tremendous amount to the communities. Why was that important? I mean, I feel it's always important for a business that survives on the customers, the community, to give back, but why was that so important to the Sorensens?
Yeah, even before the Firehouse Subs Public Safety Foundation was started, Rob and Chris, Stephen Jost, their partner, I think had a history of giving back to the community. They did that with the brand in the early days, and then there was this unique opportunity to take more control of their philanthropic endeavors, form the foundation. I mean, and I continue to serve on the board of the Public Safety Foundation, so I still have a connection with the brand via that. In fact, we just crossed the $83 million mark in donations of equipment. Yeah, and I think these days it's more common than not that businesses and brands will want to have a philanthropic connection. Almost all do in some form or another, and it's great. It's the right thing to do. Firehouse was blessed because it is such a strong connection, and when you have a brand that's founded by firefighters and is committed to supporting public safety, and that cause itself is something that has the ability to touch every single person. We all will need a first responder at some point in our lives, one way or another. So there's many great charities, but few that touch every person. So that is the work of the foundation, what we've done over my years with the brand. That's the most rewarding thing. That's in the end, that's where we make the biggest difference.
Well, it's phenomenal what that foundation has done for so many communities around the country, because I know it's not just Jacksonville, it is all over. But also, Don, I commend you. I mean, I was there when you came in. I was there before. I saw the bumps in the road that they hit. I mean, very successful up to that point, but it wasn't easy. And where you took that brand, you certainly should be very proud of yourself and compliment it. And I know the Sorensens appreciate it, and you've really left quite a legacy for your career. I appreciate you talking about that with me this morning.
Dan.
Thank you, Don. Again, Dan Edelman, your host with Heritage Capital Group. Hope that you've gained something from this discussion. And Don, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thanks, Dan.
The team at Heritage Capital Group is special because it's a collection of people across the spectrum.
We have people who have been in the shoes of owners that are looking to buy and sell, and professionals that have executed transactions helping buy and sell companies for decades.
I think when you talk to us, see what our experience is, see what our skills are, see the reach that we have, you will be very happy with the recommendation.